So again, I want to thank you all for being here with me. So first I want to start off with a brief look into a document here that everyone's familiar with. We've been talking about these things for a long time, the whole idea of technocracy. It's in the opening stages of a technopoly. We've been a technocracy for some time. We've been a technocracy, I'd say, probably since World War II, at least the end. But we are now, especially with the opening of the millennium, we are now turning into a technopoly where everything has become centralized. Technology is not only single source and impetus for life in general on Earth, but it's centralized even at its ownership, even at those that have power. It's all centralized. We see Google, for instance, right? Alphabet Inc., In-Q-Tel financing a lot of this stuff. We see the new movements of the corporation BlackRock, which is now basically the Fed teaming up with the National Treasury. So we see everything being consolidated. We've been seeing things consolidate for a long time, from the Monsanto to Bayer merger, which I discussed years ago in a video, bringing big pharma and food production together. We're also seeing the merging of many media forces, AT&T, etc. You guys are familiar with all of these mergers. There's a reason for all of these mergers, because like Bertrand Russell made very clear in his Scientific Technique and Society work, the thing about technological oligarchy is centralization. And as long as technology is improved upon, organizations have to be built to fulfill the role and the use of this technology. And in doing so, the organizations just logically, by nature, need to become not only larger to be more successful, but more centralized in order to work more efficiently. They need to be more centralized. So basically you see a slow growth of centralization to the point where everything becomes one body, one single unit. And that's what we're seeing that's what we're seeing happen between all of our industries, whether that be educational, technological, political, entertainment industries as well. Everything is coming together under one umbrella. And some might say, well, it's always been that way. You just go back to the Rockefeller Group, you can go back to the Rothschild, you could say it's always been under one umbrella. That argument can be made, and I would agree. But there has been this sense of, or should I say, that there's been separations, there's been infighting, there's been a lot of stratification within organizations that have been successful over the past, say, 30, 40 years. But all of that is going away now. You know, there was a little time of venture capitalism, of new growth, new money, as they say, especially in the 80s. You know, this is when venture capitalism became a new entrepreneurial possibility, right? When people were able to just go from rags to riches. All of that is coming to an end because the oligarchy has now, or should I say the technopoly, has now been successful. It's complete. They're to the point now where they want to switch the economy over to a system where this type of freedom is no longer possible. The idea of the entrepreneur is over to a degree. We as individuals will find ways to survive in this new industry, but at least initially they're trying to topple that entire situation. That's what we're seeing happen right now. That's why we're seeing the economy being destroyed before our eyes, because the new economy is getting ready to be erected here. And basically it's just going to be a new form of capitalism in the form of technocratic communism, which is just another form of capitalism basically, because there's the haves and the have-nots. It's just the have-nots it's a lot larger group, and there's no middle class, and the private ownership and all of these things are going to be changing, and the wealth and means to production and ownership of production and property will be controlled by the elite class, and that will just be the new capitalist class basically. That's pretty much what all of this is turning into, and it's been happening like this for a long time. There's plenty of books we've been talking about that lays all of this out. It's nothing new. It's just interesting to see it happen right before our eyes. And now we are seeing the philosopher kings come into the situation and become our gods. They're taking the role of presidency even. These computer doctors, right? They're now becoming doctors of men, like Bill Gates, for instance. Very interesting stuff. So the document I want to go over, of course, is Fyodor Kaczynski's Unabomber Manifesto. I just have a couple little pieces here. Really interesting when you read some of the things that he said. I don't mean to promote this guy or anything like that. I understand it was just another piece of a much larger psyop and central intelligence operation, but I think it's important to read some of these words because they were pressing it, right? They're totally taking over society. They're pulling down rims from the backboards of a basketball court, so you can't play basketball, so you can't play outside. They're making you wait in lines for hours to get into stores by standing 6 feet apart. You're slowly being broken down as a citizen, and you're being turned into a form of cattle. That's basically what's happening now. This is all a mass-scale psychological operation, but I want to lay out some groundwork just to prove that what we're dealing with, there's no reason to be taking the measures that we're taking. In fact, this alleged crisis crisis is pointless, and in fact this so-called virus is not a threat, and there's proof, and they admit it. So right here, this idea of high consequence infectious disease, HCID. What we have here, as of March 19th, 2020, COVID-19 is no longer considered to be a high consequence infectious disease in the UK. The four-nation public health HCID group made an interim recommendation in January to classify COVID-19 as an HCID. This was based on consideration of the UK HCID criteria about the virus and the diseases with the information available during the early stages of the outbreak. Now that more is known about COVID-19, basically now that they're figuring out it's really not a threat at all, and in fact I think that's BS. I think they knew it from the beginning. The whole so-called virus was just a ploy to bring in all of this madness and chaos. But of course they're backtracking now, and they have to say, oh well, now that we've done some actual research, we figured out we were wrong the whole time. Well, if you do any research into the models that they're using, especially the UW model, you'll realize that this model is old and outdated, and it's insufficient for its use. The public health bodies in the UK have reviewed the most up-to-date information about COVID-19 and against the UK HCID criteria. They have determined that the several features have now changed. In particular, more information is available about mortality rates, low overall, and there is now greater clinical awareness in a specific and sensitive laboratory test, which is not true. There's actually no test at all, the availability of which continues to increase. So we have nothing to worry about. We finally have a good test, and we have tons of them available. None of that is true. That's why I even think this whole thing is not true, being that, oh, it's no longer an HCID, because it never was. The whole thing is a complete farce. Not to say there's no such thing as, some aggressive influenza strain. There's many forms of coronavirus. It's an old virus. It's been around for a long time, and there's several forms of it. But it seems to be the case that they've created some phantom menace form of the virus that doesn't actually exist, and there's no real test for it. There's no real evidence to prove that it actually exists, in fact. And that's what's brilliant about their plan, is that they've gotten this over on the world, and they've made people give up their entire lives and freedoms for something that cannot even be proven. It's hilarious how you have atheists that, I won't believe anything until I see it. I don't believe in God because I've never seen proof, but they're probably the ones that are most eager to take a vaccine and believe in a crisis and a virus that they can't detect and have never seen it, don't know if it's true, don't know if it's real, and don't know any of that information regarding vaccines either. It's just hilarious. The Advisory Committee on Dangerous Pathogens is also the opinion that COVID-19 should no longer be classified as an HCID. The need to have a national coordinated response remains, but this is being met by the government's COVID-19 response. So they're saying, it's no threat, we still need to pay attention to it. The interesting part is they didn't fall back from the procedures that they're using. In fact, they've been nothing but increasing. If you look at the media today, they're saying that I think 200,000 cases, I can't remember the numbers anymore because they're getting out of pocket. They're saying, I don't know, 20,000 deaths in the United States, and I don't even know if that's accurate. They're basically saying there's more deaths and cases in the United States than in the entire world, when we know very well that this is not an HCID, it's not a threatening disease. By the so-called experts are admitting this, right? So what is an HCID? Well, in the UK, a high consequence infectious disease is defined according to the following criteria: acute infectious disease. So it's an acute infectious disease, typically a high case fatality rate, may not have effective prophylaxis or treatment, often difficult to recognize and detect rapidly, ability to spread in the community and within healthcare settings, requires an enhanced individual population and system response to ensure it is managed effectively and efficiently and safely. When I read this, doesn't this sound like the exact treatment we are giving this so-called no longer HCID virus? It's interesting how what they're saying the virus isn't, we're behaving as if it is, because we're saying it's an acute infectious disease, in the media at least, on all of these doctors, Fauci and Birx and all of these types. They're saying it does have a high case fatality rate, right? They're saying it is difficult to recognize and detect, it's asymptomatic, you can have it and not know it, it just could be there. We don't know, we're just gonna assume, and they'd say this, we're gonna assume that everyone has it. Just assume. Some Canada spokesman, I saw this video a while back, interview, he was telling the public, just assume everyone around you has it. I truly believe they are inducing a type of soft paranoid schizophrenia into the society right now for good reasons. Let's just get into that now since we're moving here. This is some excerpts from the Unabomber Manifesto. Once a technical innovation has been introduced, people usually become dependent on it so that they can never again do without it, unless it is replaced by some still more advanced innovation. Now, we could consider the cell phone or the computer in this situation. We're now dependent on this type of technology. And once it's changed and it increased, we're now further dependent on that new technology, which is the smartphone. First we had the cell phone, first we had the computer, now we have the smartphone and the tablet. So this is an example of advanced innovation. We've had advanced innovation, which we're now further addicted and reliant upon. We are dependent on these forms of technology now. There's no getting around that. Not only do people become dependent as individuals on a new item of technology, but even more, the system as a whole becomes dependent on it. So this is very obvious. We could talk about algorithms, for instance. Let's just consider the new advanced technology, the new advanced innovation of artificial intelligence and algorithms. Our entire system, for the most part, is dependent on the functioning of algorithms and artificial intelligence. If this were to break or something were to happen, our entire system would be in serious trouble. And they want us to trust these types of algorithms and this type of technology with our biological data. That's the interesting part. Bill Gates is promoting all of this new advanced innovation, right? But he doesn't explain the fact that not only will we be dependent on this new innovation as just normal human beings, just to live will be dependent on this innovation, but also our entire system will be dependent on it. This codependence, right? It's slavery. Let's continue. Imagine what would happen to a system today if computers, for example, were eliminated. Thus, the system can move in only one direction, towards greater technologization. And that's basically what I've been saying for a long time, especially in all of my Technopoly videos that I've been doing. This is exactly what I've been explaining, and it's happening before our eyes. It's all about the progress of technology at the expense of humanity. We are being put on the back burner. It's not about making human life better. It's about making technology better. And whatever happens thus far is just going to be a casualty of war. Thus, the system can move in only one direction towards greater technologization. Technology repeatedly forces freedom to take a step back. This is important because this is what we're experiencing right now. Technology repeatedly forces freedom to take a step back, but technology can never take a step back, short of the overthrow of the whole technological system. And this is spot on because technology has to move forward to work and to continue and to be successful. It can never step back. We can never go back to 3G. Our systems will no longer function. And in order for our systems to improve in their eyes, right, to progress, we have to move to higher advanced innovation like 5G, for instance. That's why we're moving towards 5G. And imagine once we get there and what we'll need next and what will be required next. And the results, the consequences, the biological consequences and results of those things are not considered. And I did on my Patreon video I just did yesterday, I discussed the philosophical implications of this and the fact that philosophy and the idea of human nature and the value of humankind is not being considered in any of this because we have specifically scientists making these decisions. We have non-human-like, human-esque individuals making the decisions for humanity. And when you don't have a philosophical perspective, when you don't have a perspective of God and value for humankind, you'll never actually meet the needs and fulfill the needs of humanity in general. You'll never meet those needs because they won't be important. It's the needs of the technology that's important. And I think that's what this says here. What we're seeing is freedom's being forced to step back. This whole idea of contact tracing is a good example. Right now, they are harping on this idea of contact tracing and how great and successful South Korea and Singapore and all these other countries were in narrowing down the infection rate and culling this virus into a small space to where it could be detected and gotten rid of. And it was done so through this whole idea of contact tracing, which is really just tagging people and tracing them. It's basically just a mass tracking system that's done through smartphones and smart technology, algorithms, and models, scientific models, right? With that idea, our freedom is taking a step back because we are now just a unit being traced. We can no longer live a sovereign, individualistic life because we're now just simply a measurement. We're just a unit to be measured and traced and accounted for. Your value and substance is limited to your ability to prove yourself immune. We're slowly being broken down into antigens and clean cells. And this is why it's so important to realize this is a result of atheism. This is a result of having atheist, scientific, I'd call them demons, running our society because they, for one, don't know humanity because they are not human in a sense. They may biologically be human. I'm not saying they're reptilian reptilians or something stupid like that. But what I am saying is they have no belief in anything outside of what they can see with their five senses. They have nothing further than empiricism. Everything has to be proven through empiricism. Therefore, nothing has any real value unless it can be proven through simple scientific methods. That's narrowing everything down to a mere object. And in result, what you have is the objectification of reality. You have the objectification of humanity and people. You become an object. You're no longer a subjective being with value and meaning and purpose. You become an object to be moved or not. And that's exactly what happens when you have atheists run a world. All right. Now, you might have some of these atheists that have some type of subjective morality, but that's nonsense and can't be proven in any way, accurately at least. It's a figment of their imagination to make themselves emotionally feel better. But you narrow things down and you figure out that's why these decisions are being made, because there's no God behind these positions and decisions. So technology can never take a step back, because if it does, the whole thing will fall apart, because it's on this trajectory, this exponential growth process. And as long as technology continues to grow and progress at this rate, humanity will continue to take a step back. And that's what we're seeing now. We're slowly being turned into what? Into cattle, into animals. We're losing our sovereignty. We're losing our ability to reason. We're losing our ability to express our free will, which is what God has given us, which is what makes us human, which is what makes us powerful in this world, on this earth, to subdue it. These things are being taken away from us. We are no longer human in many senses. We are now becoming unitary subjective or subject to the system animal, to be tagged and prodded, right? We're just cattle at this point. And it's been a slow process, a developmental process of this. It's been a long time coming, right? A lot of mind control, a lot of manipulation to get us to believe this garbage. But this is what happens in this world. When the kings of the earth, the philosopher kings of Satan, basically, are running things. The atheistic worldview of scientism. This is the production. This is the production, essentially. Restrictions of freedom is unavoidable in industrial society. He uses the term industrial society. I'd rather use the term technocratic society, because it's deeper than just industry. It's technocratic. There were industries before this type of digital technology. Now we're dealing with a digital technology that's running everything, that's running the industry. So as explained in paragraph 65 to 67, the modern man is strapped down by a network of rules and regulations, and his fate depends on the actions of persons remote from him, whose decisions he cannot influence. This describes precisely what we're dealing with. Those at the top making these decisions, they're remote. They're living in $150 million homes, making decisions. They're completely detached from reality. Bill Gates is detached from reality. He is a schizoid psychopath. He has no connection to humanity. He has no connection to intimacy or empathy. He has no affect. All of his affect is fake. His smiling, his laughing, it's all practiced and learned through watching and observing behavior his entire lifetime. These people do not understand what the value of the human being is. That's why their decisions are the way they are. And the problem with this is that we can't influence those decisions. We stand separated, detached, and independent of these decisions, yet dependent on the decision makers. And the advanced, innovative technologies just makes things more stringent, because they're able and they have the ability to control us from remote locations through this technology. You know, imagine if this was going back to where it was, weaponry and combat. You think Bill Gates would survive in a brawl? Do you think he would survive in a war and a battle? Of course not. This type of system is built for men like him. Weaklings. These schizoid alien type men that have no spines, that have to rely on phantom menaces and the digital programs and remote technology that they can hide behind. It's perfect for these types. And these people are detached. They have no connection to not only humanity and reality, but they have no connection to the people they're making the decisions for. They don't know our communities. They're not on the grounds with us. They don't live our lives. They have no respect for our being, yet we allow them to make our decisions. And when I say allow, we do allow it. Power is in numbers. It's very true. If everyone just said, you know what, we're not doing this, it would all end. They can't control millions and millions and millions of people. What are they going to do? Firebomb the planet? It wouldn't happen. That's why they focus on psychology. That's why everything is psychological. And there's no need for any other form of force, because it's the strongest force, because it is dealing with the spirit. So all psychology is, it's just a secular way to explain it, and they don't understand its source. The psychological, it's philosophy. Psychology is philosophy. It's a type of scientific philosophy. They don't understand where it really comes from. It's really just explaining the God's creation. They don't understand the source is God. But anyway, we won't get into that. This is not accidental or a result of arbitrariness of arrogant bureaucrats. It is necessary and inevitable in any technologically advanced society. The system has to regulate human behavior closely in order to function, aka psychology. The technocratic system, the technocratic industrial society has to, relies upon it. It cannot function otherwise. Has to regulate human behavior. Regulate human behavior, aka mind control. Has to regulate human behavior closely in order to function. It cannot function without your compliance. It cannot function without your compliance. For example, the system provides people with food because the system couldn't function if everyone starved. It attends to people's psychological needs whenever it can conveniently do so because it couldn't function if too many people became depressed or rebellious. But the system, for good, solid, practical reasons, must exert constant pressure on people to mold their behavior to the needs of the system. Just reiterating everything I've been saying and pretty much a great deal of what my videos contain. The concept of mental health in our society is defined largely by the extent to which an individual behaves in accord with the needs of the system and does so without showing signs of stress. Very, very important words here because it describes exactly what we're experiencing. Technology is a more powerful social force than the aspiration for freedom. This is poignant because we are more concerned with the effects and progress and success of technology than we are with our own freedom. People are more concerned with the possibility of new vaccines. People are more concerned with the technology that is going to make their lives simpler, more convenient, that is going to give them more comfort. And this is all psychologically motive wishes, prayers, right? Because they do pray to a type of God. Not the God, but a type of God. Technology is their God. They're not thinking about, people aren't thinking about their freedom, their sovereignty, their ability to live life as they want to live it. We're now thinking for the technology. The technology has now replaced our own will in many ways. And I think that's kind of what this is explaining here. It is not possible to make a lasting compromise between technology and freedom because technology is by far the more powerful social force and continually encroaches on freedom through repeated compromise. Repeated is it's done systematically and consecutively, and we become compartmentalized through this type of repetition of technological advancement. Every year we get something new that takes us a little further from our freedom, and that's, I think, exactly what this is explaining here. So basically, COVID it's no longer a pandemic, guys. It's no longer a threat. The UK government is admitting it. All their so-called experts and top scientists are admitting this is no longer an infectious disease, or at least one of concern. No longer an HCID. It's less threatening than H1N1. It comes nowhere near to H1N1. N1, it was way more of a threat. Did we have the same reaction? We kill, or should I say, 6 million people a year die from alcoholic attributable deaths. Do we bat an eyelash at any of that? 6 million people we allow to die based on our industries that promotes it? Do we end the society? Do we shut down the economy for 6 million that died for those reasons? Not at all. Right, so just the logic alone proves this is just complete nonsense. So why the panic? Well, I'd say the pandemic is controlled socioeconomic demolition. It's a ploy. It's an opportunity. They can't let a good crisis go to waste. It's an opportunity to change society. And this is why we have leaders like Bill Gates running the show, because he is the visionary for the future society, for the globalized technocracy, the technopoly. He is the visionary for this type of existence. That's why he's stepping in, because we all know he's not an epidemiologist, he's not a virologist, he's not a doctor, he's not an economist, he's not a sociologist. What could he possibly know about any of these things? He's an IT guy. He makes a subpar product that has just a monopoly on society based on some decent advertising campaigns. He's cornered the market through dishonesty and corruption. He doesn't know anything outside of the small pocket of computer engineering. Oh, he has a lot of money, right? Prestige, as I talked about in my recent video. It's all about prestige at the end of the day. You got people willing to give them their lives because this man has a lot of money. It's madness, absolute madness. So that's why we have people like Bill Gates running the show now. Not because he actually knows how to deal with a pandemic, not because he knows anything about viruses or anything about people. He knows about the new system that is going to be rolled out, and he is the visionary and the mind behind, or at least one of the minds behind it. So I'm going to pull up this SARS study. I got a SARS study here. This is just a little more evidence to prove some of my perspectives, some of my points, okay? This is an actual experiment that happened in 2007 in Canada regarding the SARS outbreak and how they actually did a real quarantine test, right? This is real evidence here. I'll try not to spend too much time on it because it's a bit dry, but I think this stuff is important to give you a little background and maybe support some of the insight here. This was published on July 30th in 2007. This is through the NCBI, which is the National Center for Biotechnology Information. What I'm going to show you here is how I have proof that not only the government, but the epidemiologists and the field of epidemiology, as well as the globalists, know very well the conditions of a type of pandemic. And we've already tested what would happen. And this is before Event 201 that everyone's talking about. We've already done a full study on 4,199 individuals that were quarantined in 2007 due to a response to the SARS outbreak. And a complete study was done on these individuals. We understand the psychological effects. We understand the sociological effects. We already knew what would happen. And it's interesting how we have these studies available. We have these results available. And clearly they've been completely disregarded based on how we've responded to this thing. And this is just more of my evidence, my personal evidence that I'm bringing forth to prove to you that this is being done purposely. Okay, so this is Epidemiology and Infection. As I said, July 30th, 2007 it was published online. The study is called Understanding Compliance and Psychological Impact of the SARS Quarantine Experience. So as I stated, we've already ran a complete experiment on what quarantine does to a group quarantine. And when you hear the findings, it's gonna make you think a little bit here. Let's just go through the summary just to give you an understanding. So this study examines a cohort of persons quarantined during 2003. This was done in 2003, not 2007. It was published in 2007. Sorry about that. Outbreak in Canada, and describes their understanding of difficulties and compliance with and psychological impact of the quarantine experience. So we already are aware of the difficulties and of compliance. We're already aware of the psychological impact of the quarantine experience. So it goes to show that we already can see how ubiquitous this procedure has been over the past few weeks in the world. We already see how they lock things down abruptly and so thoroughly and uniformly. And they knew ahead of time that this would affect people on a large scale psychologically, and they continued to do it. That's proof that they don't care about the people. And in fact, I think they want people to lose their minds. And in fact, we think about what Kaczynski said just a moment ago that I showed you. They must control the mental health. They must control the behavior. And if they can make the majority of people unstable mentally, then they can control them. And I think that's what a lot of this has to do with. A mailed questionnaire was administered to 1,912 eligible adults included in the impact of the event scale. The low compliance with quarantine requirements introduces concerns about the effectiveness of quarantine as a public health measure. So in this study, there was low compliance. And based on the results, most of the younger people didn't really comply. A lot of people just didn't even want to be included in the experiment. So the sample size is a bit off. It's not fully representative of the general population. It's mostly of an older population, I think maybe 40s and up. But what this also shows is that the younger people are harder to convince of these things. Showing you this experiment here, I think, confirms that what we're seeing is a hard push for propaganda based on old studies. What I'm saying is I think they took information from this study and others and realized we have to ramp up the propaganda. That's why you're seeing such crazy stuff in the media today. Even normies are realizing that, wow, the media is really pushing this. They're really exaggerating the numbers. And I think this study kind of sheds a little light on the purpose of that. Improvements in compliance and reduced psychological distress may be possible by minimizing duration, revising requirements, and providing enhanced education and support. So what they're saying is there was psychological distress. And the number one way to reduce that they found in the study was to minimize duration. Isn't it interesting how duration is being increased consecutively right now? They are dragging this out as long as possible, while the numbers and the effect of this so-called virus are dwindling. They're increasing the duration of quarantine. Isn't that interesting? And it further speaks to the idea of the induced instability, the playing with the minds of society. They know, right? They know they need to minimize duration for the quarantine to lower stress psychologically. Revising the requirements, making things a little easier. And it seems like they're giving us more requirements. And providing enhanced education and support. This is basically propaganda. Enhanced education is nothing more than saying propaganda. Okay, so during 2003, SARS outbreak centered in Toronto. This is just giving you a little background on the study. Canada, local public health units were responsible for identifying and quarantining contacts of potential SARS cases. Durham region, a jurisdiction of 550,000 people immediately east of Toronto, recorded the third highest numbers of SARS cases in Canada. From from 21st of March to the 24th of June. This is interesting how we're experiencing about the same time span, right? Isn't it interesting that we kind of started around the same time, and they're talking about ending our so-called quarantine in June? Isn't it interesting? Could we possibly be undergoing a new experiment that is, in a sense, taking note from this specific experiment? 21st of March to 4th of June. Very interesting timing. 4,199 people were placed into quarantine. In our situation, the whole earth is being put into quarantine. The Durham Region Health Department developed a computerized database to follow all quarantine individuals and recorded demographics. This is contact tracing. So we've already had these methods employed. What I'm proving here is that we're already aware of how quarantining works. We're already aware of how groups react to quarantines. We're already aware of how to track disease during quarantine. So it's interesting to see how the media is laying out all of this stuff about how we're dropping the ball. We don't know how to trace it. We gotta look to Asia and their tracing methods when we've already done these experiments. And this is just to show that all of this stuff you're hearing is fake in the media. Everything is lies because we already know this information. We didn't drop the ball. We did it on purpose. We're purposely making these mistakes. We're purposely saying we don't have enough tests, so you'll beg to be tested. We're purposely saying, we're having trouble tracking this virus. We don't know. We're just so inexperienced with tracking viruses and quarantines. We don't know how to track everybody, so I guess we've got to move to this type of technology. It's the only thing that we can rely on. No, they're doing this because they want you to beg for the tracking technology. They want you to ask for it. As I said, not with your word will you ask for slavery, but by holding out your hand. You're gonna hold it out and say, give me UBI, give me your technology, give me your mark, give it to me. That's how you're gonna ask for slavery. Hospitals are getting paid high amounts for ventilators. They're getting high reimbursement for anything regarding CV-19. So there's incentive for hospitals to diagnose CV-19 because they're getting super huge amounts of money. And this is also why they're pushing, a lot of these companies want to push vaccines because they want to be the ones that supply billions of vaccines a year for the entire globe. So there's an economic or financial component here. But I say more than anything, of course, at the end of the day, it's about control and bringing in a new system, a complete new system. But along the way, you have the frontmen and the lower players, the managers of the situation, of the operation, the managers, the capitalists of the situations are cashing in. So their incentive to cash in is propping up the clandestine plans for those at the top. It's like this system that works in unison. It's like a collective machine that's geared in a way that just operates perfectly. And everybody is kind of paid off in their own little way. All their desires are met. Very interesting how it all plays out. Well, there's money here, guys. As I said, there's levels to this. There's a financial, economic level to it, but that's just the surface. It's not all about money. That's the surface. At the top, it's about control. It's about shifting society, molding things in a way that will fit the new technocracy, aka technopoly. That's on the way.